That first stage will burn for a total of 5 minutes and 47 seconds. And when the vehicle is at a fair enough altitude, at about 3 minutes 40 seconds, the fairing itself will jettison and reveal the HTV vehicle underneath. Here's a nice countdown of the flight sequence.
So it's 15 minutes.
Again, 5 minutes 47 seconds is when that first stage will cut off. It'll enter a short coast period of about 7 seconds before that first stage separates from the vehicle. The second stage ignites just after 6 minutes into the flight and carries it for another 8 minutes and 19 seconds. Now, after the second stage cuts off, there will be another short coast period before that second stage physically separates from the HTV vehicle. And that separation occurring just about 15 minutes after liftoff. Once the HTV is in a good orbit, we'll confirm that the HTV's solar panels that are along the outside of the vehicle are receiving good power. And then HTV control over in Tsukuba, Japan, will take over the flight of the vehicle for the next few days until its rendezvous to the International Space Station this Saturday morning.
Welcome back to the Chronicles of Triple S. We are here for the Kunturi 8, also known as the HTV 8. It's the 8th flight of...
Central Time, 1 a.m. out at the pad, 5 minutes until launch.
5 minutes away to launch. It's the 8th flight of the H2 transfer vehicle, which is the bottom rocket. A robotic cargo spacecraft to resupply the International Space Station. Just trying to get some. It's 5.3 tons, metric tons, 9.8 meters by 4.4 meters. Tanegashima is the space center for JAXA, the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency, and it's going to berth at the ISS, so it's going to berth rather than the other one. I think berthing's with an arm. I'm sure someone's going to pull me up on that one. We're 5 minutes away from launch here. And this should be fabulous.
Those tools specially designed to work with such a delicate piece of hardware. There's also oxygen and nitrogen tanks, some specialized hardware for the water recovery system, as well as the treadmill. Again, in the pressurized compartment of the vehicle, about 5,000 pounds of cargo. Mission Control Houston, following along from the milestones provided by the HTV control and Takasaki range control over at the Tanegashima Space Center that are overseeing the launch. Everything still on track for a launch just 3 minutes from now.
3 minutes away, people. 3 minutes away. I heard them talking about taking batteries up to the International Space Station, as well as
the International Space Station, passing over the Atlantic Ocean, now crossing over into the continent of Africa, the southern border of the country of Liberia. It's on a northeastern track and will be located over at the time of...
Just mute that. The JAXA Experiment for Cell Biology Experiment Facility. The JAXA Experiment Sony Optical Link for ISS. A satellite optical communication demonstration developed with Sony Computer Science Laboratories. Look at Sony go. JAXA Experiment Hourglass, which will investigate the behavior of soil and rock particles under low gravity conditions. Gas bottle for JAXA experiment. Experiment materials for electrostatic levitation furnace. I will look that up. CubeSats to be deployed from the ISS. So the International Space Station is it's a go-to facility these days. Like, instead of having a satellite, they just bolt stuff to the ISS. So new water tanks coming in. System supply cargo tank for nitrogen oxide. Fuck yeah. They're getting on the nags up there, boy. We're only a few minutes away. 1 minute until launch. And 6 lithium-ion batteries. Orbital replacement units for replacing the ISS's existing nickel hydrogen batteries. Nickel hydrogen, eh?
Seconds to launch. Again, the solid rocket boosters and that core stage, the first stage containing liquid fuel, will carry the rocket through the first 1 minute 54 seconds of its launch. Everything's still on track, 10 seconds to launch. Getting a good view of the engine underneath, now igniting.
All systems are go. Engine
We're igniting. We'll go for liftoff.
Zero and liftoff of the HTV-8 and the H-2B rocket, carrying its way 4 tons of cargo to the International Space Station. Lighting up the night sky over southern Japan. Everything looking good through the flight so far. Those 4 strap-on solid rocket boosters will carry the vehicle through the first 1 minute 54 seconds of the launch.
These boosters are really having a good go out there. I didn't notice any roll procedure. Some have roll procedures even though they're symmetrical rockets. Haven't noticed anything with this.
Now 1 minute into the flight.
Strong rocket there by Japan. That's from solid rocket boosters. It's a long way. When it's just could be sugar rockets, could be gunpowder. Hopefully it's
20 more seconds before those solid rocket boosters burn out.
Hopefully it's nothing that's going to explode.
Everything looking good so far. The vehicle itself heading towards the southeast to get in the right phasing to meet up with the International Space Station. You can see the solid rocket boosters beginning to burn out. We should see them separate in pairs coming up here in just a few seconds. There's the first pair of solid rocket boosters separating. And the second pair. Now that core stage will continue to burn until 5 minutes 47 seconds into the flight, burning liquid fuel, liquid hydrogen, and liquid oxygen. Good confirmation of booster separation, 2 minutes 47 seconds into the flight, 3 minutes left of this first stage.
I saw they got nickel hydrogen, which is very close to a nickel metal hydride battery that we used to use before lithium came along. I was going to say it's almost like lithium wasn't supposed to be allowed on the International Space Station, but it seems they are allowing.
3 minutes, 47 seconds into the flight, everything looking good so far.
Lithium batteries.
That first stage will continue to burn for another 2 minutes.
Nickel metal hydride batteries definitely safer. You don't never heard of them exploding in your overhead compartment in your charging bag. We've got 4,820 people watching the NASA Live. So seems to be about max. So hoping on some better graphics. It's just a 1960s type camera off in the distance. So even if it did explode now when we...
4 minutes, 47 seconds into the flight, 1 minute left of this stage. Everything continued to be on track throughout the flight of the HTV today and the H-2B rocket, performing nominally. Again, 5 minutes, 47 seconds into the flight will be the cutoff of that first stage. It'll enter into a 7-second coast period before the first and second stage separates. Another 7 seconds until the second stage is ignited. Everything continuing to be on track. 5 minutes, 27 seconds into the flight, 20 more seconds of the first stage burning.
I'd like to know the difference in price between this and, say, Boeing or SpaceX. Oh, here's some graphics.
Switching to animation right after the burnout of that first stage.
It's now out of view. There we go. Second stage fire.
And confirmation that that first stage did successfully cut off. Second stage burning now. First and second stages separated.
Meters a second.
This second stage will burn for well over 8 minutes, 8 minutes 19 seconds.
That's 5.5 k's a second.
It'll be just over 15 minutes until the HTV itself is inserted into a good orbit. Coming up on 7 minutes into the flight, everything looking good so far.
Very nice. Very nice, I like. It's very hard to see some of those graphics, even though they might just be characters. That's probably why I can't see them. Try to work out which one is altitude. I'm assuming it's the bottom one. 244 kilometers at 5,555 meters per second. That's 5.5 kilometers a second. They need to reach about 28,000.
8 minutes into the flight, HTV continuing on a nominal track heading towards the southeast to get into the right phasing to meet up with the International Space Station, which is just about to cross over into an orbital nighttime as it crosses over the Mediterranean Sea towards the western coast of Greece. Meanwhile, the HTV heading on a southeasterly course over the Pacific Ocean to get into a good orbit. Again, it's about 15 minutes from the time of liftoff to the time of orbital insertion, and the HTV separates from the launch vehicle.
$5,762. It's 20,000. Just over 20,000 kilometers an hour now. So I need to get to 28,000 for the altitude of this low Earth orbit. Thereabouts. Altitude is based on speed. Gravity doesn't exist. It's just another moment of inertia. Yeah, so this is I'm going to rate this a 10 out of 10 because it was nominal. Very nominal. It was a very nominal launch.
"10 minutes into the flight, that second stage continuing to burn as expected, everything on track as the HTV makes its way through its ascent milestones. There are only a few milestones left. That second stage burns for well over 8 minutes total. We're now 10 minutes into the flight. We could expect a cutoff about 14 minutes 20 seconds into the flight. It'll enter into a short coast period. That coast lasting just about 51 seconds before there's physical separation between the HTV and the second stage of the H-2B rocket.
Yeah, rock and roll. So, go Japan. Go Mitsubishi. Always made good cars. Always made good
11
cars.
minutes, 30 seconds into the flight. HTV-8 and the second stage of the vehicle performing nominally. Less than 3 minutes until the second stage cuts off and the vehicle enters a short coast period.
It's now doing 6,600.
Again, the phasing here gets it into an orbit to catch up with the ultimate destination of HTV-8, the International Space Station, where it will arrive on Saturday morning, capture scheduled for 6:15 a.m. Central Time. The International Space Station itself crossing over into an orbital nighttime now just north of the Black Sea over the southern border of Ukraine.
Seven sevens. 28. All the sevens, so it's going to get to 7,777. Yeah. That's going to be it for me. Even if it does, you can trust Japan to Sally efforts a failure.
13 minutes, 20 seconds into the flight. Everything looking good so far for that second stage. Expect a cutoff just under a minute from now. Again, after that cutoff, it'll enter into a short coast period before the physical separation between the HTV and the second stage.
I'm just saying the last 2 times that people have tried to put something on the moon, everything's just gone blank. And then we find out later that it's either squashing against hundreds of miles of the moon, or still there and it landed properly and just can't touch it. They don't want it started. Those the Indians. Israel decided to
14 minutes, 10 seconds into the flight.
smash a mooncraft across the moon.
Should expect a cutoff here in just a few seconds.
What up? Fifth country in the world to do it. India landed second or third thing on the moon, but they've lost contact with it. I need to get an update for you for that. But we've got more moon missions coming up. More moon missions.
Second stage has cut off. Now just waiting for confirmation of physical separation between the HTV and the second stage.
Boom. Physical separation.
And confirmation of separation.
Everyone is quite pleased with themselves.
Getting a look at HTV control over in Tsukuba, Japan. A good flight of the vehicle. Looking back at the launch pad where the H-2B rocket took off just 15 minutes ago.
Congratulations, JAXA. Congratulations, International Space Community. Here concludeth our live. See you.